Hey everybody, this is David Dulany with Tenbound and Kyle Morris with Sift Data. Kyle, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Awesome, dude. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the Break and Build number 4. This is the fourth one that we've done, and Kyle is our guest star today. So thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. So we're right up on the hour right now. People are just starting to trickle in. We'll get started in just a couple minutes here. Kyle, what's going on? What's new up in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so I live up in Bend. I'm trying to ski as much as I can. I took a day off. We got like 8 inches of snow overnight one night, so I snuck out and didn't work last week. My wife just got President's Club for her company, so I'm out of office next week, heading out on a trip on Sunday, cranking away on business, so things are good.
Oh man, you definitely got some momentum. That's exciting.
Thanks.
That is exciting. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. We're right at the top of the hour here on Break and Build number 4. And if you're just joining us, I'd like to introduce you to Kyle Morris with Sift Data, who's going to be our guest star today on the show. Kyle, thanks again for joining us from all the way from Bend, Oregon. Tell us about yourself and what Sift Data is working on.
Yeah, so what Sift Data does is we track when contacts and leads change jobs and surface those triggers in Salesforce. I started this company about 4 years ago, actually, as like a consulting business. So I was doing a lot of Salesforce consulting. I'd done a bunch of operations stuff with Salesforce. So I was helping some companies out, realized that there was this need because the company I used to work for, we were churning a lot of accounts because our champions would leave. And I used to manage a big SDR team and found that the people that bought seemed to be people that had purchased in the past. It was a really easy sell. So I figured if I could track those things, it would make life easier from a sales perspective. So, I'm bootstrapping this company, launched beta back in April, May-ish, and been kind of growing since then.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And this is something that I hear a lot out in the marketplace of you're working with one person at a company, right? And you have a great relationship. They're a big advocate of your product. And then one day you call them and they're gone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And most people you end up getting caught flat-footed, right? If from a churn perspective, you don't find out that your champion's left till the new champion comes in and says, by the way, I don't want to renew. Depending on the scale of your business and how many customers you have, it can be a big challenge. So if you can get that intel, it seems to be a big advantage. I've heard prospects call it movers and shakers. I had a guy just the other day called it movers and shakers. Another guy in the advertising world called it follow the skeleton, which I'd never heard before, but it was like the idea of following this person from company to company. They can basically drag your product along with them. So if you've got a really solid advocate, a big net promoter, you can just leverage that to close deals a little bit more easily.
Very nice. Okay. So, and how does it work? Like if you're an SDR or BDR, if you're a sales rep and you're using Salesforce, does it just like pop up as an alert or something like that? How do you find out when they're moving?
Yeah. So, in my mind, if you're a rep in Salesforce, you shouldn't have to learn a new system. You shouldn't go outside of Salesforce. In my mind, your system of record is Salesforce. And so in the system, if you're a SDR, you'd get a notification saying, Kyle at Gigia just left to go to Sift Data, or Steve at company X just went to company Y and that's now in your territory. We'll provide contact information, stuff like that, so you can like take the next step. But that's generally how it works. Is you in the system should get those notifications, and because it's in Salesforce, it's pretty flexible, right? Like Salesforce can do so much with process automation and workflows that you can. Sky's the limit. Some people create new leads, new contacts, move the contact. There's a bunch of different ways you can slice that.
That's amazing. I mean, I know for a fact that a lot of people do that manually. So just having a solution is very, very cool. And I know, starting out a new business, like you kind of have to be the SDR to some extent. I mean, I have to be the SDR every day.
Yeah.
And the reason that I wanted to have you on the show, other than for the fact that we go way back, if you guys have listened to the podcast that we did, Kyle and I geek out on this stuff a lot. And we go way back in this arena, but you had a great story on LinkedIn on your blog about how you created some messaging as your own personal SDR to get the word out on your company, and I thought that framework was something that we should definitely dive into on this, because I mean, your conversion rate was off the charts.
Yeah, it seems to, like, yeah, we can dig into that for sure. It you know, my background, I was an SDR initially, so I definitely know how to get that attention and send. I try to think that I can send decent emails, and I know how hard it is for companies to stand out, because all the folks I talk to, they're just like, I get inundated with vendors hitting me up every day, and so you need some way to stand out that hopefully doesn't cost you a ton of money or slow you down. So finding that balance is tough, with personalizations, with, you know, quality and speed is always a real challenge. So yeah, happy to dig in as much as you want.
Yeah, let me bring that up now. Of course, I can't find. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, live TV. So okay, so I got it right here. Now I just need to share my screen with you guys. Okay, and by the way, everyone on the call, we've got a Q&A box open. So as we're kind of deconstructing this messaging, definitely feel free to hit the Q&A. I'm running the show here as best that I can, and we'll try to get that answered for you. But Kyle, if you could see my screen,
yep.
we go through, and this is, if you guys haven't read this, definitely I'll put this link in the YouTube video after we tape this. But the name of the blog post that caught my eye: the best pitch I've ever received. So let me cue you up here, Kyle. So this is the response that you got on this email from the guy. It said, "Kyle, well done. The best pitch email that I've ever received. Inspirationally good. I forwarded to my head of RevOps to reach out to you. If he doesn't within the next week, shoot me another note." Okay, so I think everybody on the call, those are the type of things that we want to get back from an email. Yeah. So set me up here, Kyle. Who is this guy? And run us through your process.
Yeah, so I don't want to give too much away as like who this is, because they already get hit up enough. So I don't want people to think that they can just hit them up and get through. But you know, we're really targeting B2B companies, 40 to 2,000 employees. Really any B2B company. And so it's a pretty big market. And, you know, I'm hitting the VP of sales here. It's at a company of about 300 employees, probably about 50 or 60 sales reps. So again, getting hit by emails all the time by this person. And so the process that I'd use was, you know, in the back of my mind, when I'm sending good emails, I need to do two things. One is create value. Like if I can create value when I'm sending you an email, it's going to, you know, make you want to talk to me. And the same goes for demos, right? You always hear about when you're doing your demo for a decision maker, you need to be creating value or they're going to tune out. And so if I can create value for you, that's going to help me stand out. And the second is, so create value. And I just totally lost my train of thought.
Right.
I need to be creating value. And, it was identify blind spots in their business if you can.
Yeah.
So the way that I do that is we track when people change jobs. So I have a team that goes through the company's case studies to look for their customers that have changed jobs. And this might seem extremely time consuming. And when we first started doing it, it was. So there's a podcast, Masters of Scale, which you might have heard of, where they talk about do it till your fingers bleed, right? Do it manually until your fingers bleed. And that's how it was. Like I was digging through case studies and I could only find a couple an hour. And then I learned that process and move on to the next step. But, you know, the idea being that if I can identify a prospect that bought your product that's now at a new company that you don't know about, I've identified a blind spot in your business. So any sales leader is going to say, what the hell is going on? How do we not know about this? And second, I'm creating value because they can send that to their rep, have them check Salesforce. And if that hasn't been updated, they need to talk. So that's how I figured I could stand out, is by doing those two things.
Okay. So you're creating value and you're trying to find a blind spot. Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting because that is tremendous value. If you can break through and go, hey, did you realize that there could potentially be a way to make more money or solve more problems if you knew about this? But what I'm curious about is that research sounds pretty time consuming to be able to do that. And your fingers are starting to bleed. So you're only one guy, you know. Yeah. How do you go about speeding up that process?
Yeah, so initially it was me going through every customer, every case study they had, checking LinkedIn, looking for job changes, like really time consuming. Mm-hmm. Then the first hire I did is I hired a person to go through and just identify case studies. They just went through and found every case study they had and just had the LinkedIn URL of the person. And I'd go through myself and just spot check them. And so I was able to take one step of it and automate that whole thing. And so, my mind, you have to crawl, walk, run. You can't run until you walk. You can't walk until you can crawl. So if I haven't figured out how to do this process, I can't hand it off to somebody. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I can't say, hey, I want you to go find case studies and I want you to do X, Y, and Z, because I don't necessarily know what that looks like. I don't know what success looks like. So I had to really struggle through that pain point for a while, figure that out. And so the first pain point I had was, I don't have enough case studies to dig through. That's taking up a lot of my time. So I hired a person overseas on Upwork, gave them access to Salesforce, and they just went through and started finding all the case studies. The second thing that they did is I realized that a bottleneck was I'd identify these job changes, but then I was copy pasting screenshots from LinkedIn, screenshots from case studies into these emails, and it was taking a long time. So I had another person that I hired that just would go get screenshots of all of the things and upload them into Salesforce. So then I could pre-templatize my emails that says, David at company X just moved to company Y. I had a screenshot of the case study. I had a screenshot of old company, screenshot of new company. Then I could copy paste, dump it in an email and send it. Then the next step was contacts are taking me a long time. So I had another person just doing contacts all day. And then eventually I got to the point where now I have one person that just sends emails out all day. So I have each process broken out completely separately with different workers. And what that helps me do is I can identify bottlenecks. So if my contacts person is sitting idle, that's probably because we don't have enough case studies for them. And if my email guy is idle, then it's probably we don't have enough contacts. So like I can easily identify those bottlenecks. Where before, at my first pass of this, I actually just hired 3 people and just said, here's your process end to end, go. And I couldn't gauge their success because they were all really struggling because it's a really complex process to go through everything that they need to do. So I ended up breaking it down into individual pieces, and that made my life a whole lot easier. And their output went through the roof.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is basically it's like first you had to design the factory.
Yes.
And you had to identify the inputs, that would go into getting that end result, which is this killer messaging. So first you identified those inputs, and then you just realized, hey, this is so time consuming that I need some help here. So, after a lot of trial and error, you started to bring people in to help you build that factory, and then you could see where those choke points are.
Exactly.
So a lot of the people, that are listening on the call, they might just be a person of one. Like they can't necessarily go back and hire people or go back and ask their boss. So it sounds like a good takeaway would be first, you got to figure out, what are the blind spots or pain points that you can identify in the messaging? How do you tie that to value? And then how do you map out that factory process of creating relevant messaging? Because you're going to stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your goal is to not only craft a good message or call it a good product, you need to increase your throughput rate. Not only do you need to do a great job of building awesome emails or calls or whatever works for you, but you need to speed up the cycle with which you can get through them. And so I couldn't know what that good product, which I'm calling my email, I couldn't know what that looked like till I'd done it myself and got my nose bloody doing that a bunch of times. If I would have tried to do this right out of the gates, I probably would have struggled because I didn't know who the right contact was, the right company, the right message, the right types of case studies, things like that. Over time, because I got that feedback from the market, which was mostly negative, I iterated and made it better, and then I could hire a person. So I only hired a person when my fingers were effectively bleeding, right? I was very tired of doing contact research, so I hired a person to do that. I was very tired of sending emails, so I did that.
And I think where we get caught up and kind of why we're doing a break and build webinar is a lot of people think that you can just put your messaging into a cadence product and blast out 10,000 messages and then play the conversion rates. Yeah. But the way that you have this set up, that's a totally different mindset than your blast and pray scenario, right?
Yeah. And, I came from the space where a company was selling to enterprises. So you can't just blow through your market so quickly. You can't just take 10,000 people, send them an email because you might be out of context and you have nothing else to say later on. Yeah. And so in my mind, it's very much like a measure twice and cut once. Again, if I can create value for you specifically, and I need to stand out from the crowd and identify a blind spot, I can't just take a generic email, dump it in and send it. You'll get some responses, but in my mind, not as many as if you like take the time. And again, that balance comes between how do you not spend too much time, but how do you stand out? And I feel like I've found that for our business because I've, getting that feedback from the market where they're saying this is the best email that I've seen. And because this is one where my rep literally copy pasted into Gmail and sent it. They didn't have to tweak anything. It was, they can crank out a couple, like 100 an hour, just like churn through these things.
Yeah. So this is great. So I've got the email app. So take us through, like, how did you find the case study? How did you find this person? And then why did you get this kind of response from it?
Yeah. So the process is our rep goes to, call it Tenbound. They'll go to tenbound.com and go through all of your case studies. They take every person that's mentioned in your case studies or any YouTube videos you've put up and dumps those into Salesforce. Here are all of my leads, essentially.
Okay.
Then Sift Data integrates with Salesforce and identifies job changes. So I dump all of your case studies into my system, and then every day I get notifications saying, Tenbound had a case study with Kyle at Sift Data. He just left for a new job. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting notifications in my system when your customers are changing jobs. Because what I initially found was that I would go check Tenbound's case studies, and then 2 weeks later I had to go back to like look at all the people again. And then if I could make the system just work for me, Sift Data, it notified me when your contacts change jobs. So then I can take that and only reach out to you at times when your contacts just change jobs this week, this month, whatever.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. So we dump the leads in, then it runs through Sift Data. Whenever a job change pops up, that flags up the account as we need contacts, we need screenshots, we need all that stuff. Then I have another worker that picks that up. As they work through all of those, that flags the account to my other SDR. This account needs you to send emails out. And then they basically go through that. So it's like kind of a 3 or 4 step process there.
Okay, great. And then, so we've got it set up. So the subject line is the name of the company, case study.
Yep.
And that's super relevant to what they're going to do. And then I like just structurally how I look at this, and it's kind of broken out into, very brief, value-based sentences that I could easily read on my phone, right?
Yeah. I remember when I was an SDR, I saw some executive that said, like, I try to keep my emails under 5 sentences. I ask that you do the same. And so I kind of had that mentality of like, people want you to communicate with them the way they communicate with you, and executives are busy, they're terse, and you got to be the same way, get your value across quickly. So like, I'm letting them know, I saw a case study your team put out with this company. They should know who that company is. They might know who that person is. Looks like he just left to take on a similar role at a new company that might appeal to them. That's probably on their prospect list. And then I get into the value prop of, again, I'm not talking about Sift Data at all. Like, I don't want to pitch my product. I want to talk about their company, the blind spot that they don't know about. I haven't even mentioned Sift Data yet. And then again, leveraging triggers is the most effective way to help their company, nothing to do with Sift Data. And then I finally get in and say, we're helping companies like this do that. Can we talk? And
nice. Okay.
That's kind of my thought is like, when you go into a pitch, if you just jump into like, this is what we do, listen to what I have to say, there's not a whole lot of discovery there. It tends to tune people out a little bit, or people tend to tune out.
Okay. And so for someone, because I'm sure that there's a wide variety of products, that people are selling that are on the call. So it sounds like, just big picture, thing number one is you've got to take the time to do the research that's going to make the initial part relevant to the person opening the email. Otherwise, you're going straight into product that they probably just don't even care.
That's a good point that I hadn't touched on, which is my messaging to heads of sales is totally different than messaging to head of customer success, which is totally different than heads of marketing. Because like, heads of sales cares about pipeline, closing deals faster, and bigger deals. Head of renewals cares about churn, and head of marketing wants more MQLs, more top of funnel. So if I try to use the wrong message to the wrong person, it's never going to resonate. So you have to have the way I was kind of taught is like, what are the KPIs for the person you're trying to sell to? What keeps them up at night? What could they get fired over? Generate pipeline, close more deals, et cetera. So like, if you're trying to use the wrong message, you're never going to get through.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, like, to some extent, outbound prospecting is you're trying to talk to as many people to see, do they have a problem that would push them off the fence enough to take a meeting with me? And so you need to talk to a lot of people. And that's why, speeding up the research process is great. But it's basically like, if those are their major KPIs and they have a problem that you could potentially solve with, you have a great solution. Let's set up a meeting. If they don't have that problem or they just don't really care, then, you know, you're not going to get the meeting anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might sound harsh, but like if your product doesn't directly appeal to someone's KPIs, like they're never going to buy your product. Why would they? They have 1,000 priorities and their KPIs are going to be their top 4. And if they're working on anything else, they're probably spending the time in the wrong place because it's not a key performance indicator. So, you know, a lot of folks have asked me like, well, you know, my business, we can't really help people in the same way. I'm like, then you're probably selling a product people don't need or don't want, which seems a little harsh, but like, you know, you with consulting services for companies specifically around SDRs, there are so many ways to identify problems with SDRs. Do they have a bunch of turnover? Do they have a bunch of people that you've talked to that are super unhappy on the SDR team? A bunch of AE turnover. There's lots of indicators of struggling. And like, you know, having been an SDR leader, these are the problems that you face every day. I was a leader of a big SDR team. I know what sales leaders struggle with. I don't need to wonder if they have this problem. I know every sales leader struggles with pipeline. I know every CS leader struggles with churn and every marketing leader struggles with top of funnel. So like, I don't need to ask them if that's a problem. I know that it's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, the homework could be from this call is, you know, sit down and write out that list of like 5 bullet points of the KPIs of your buyer, and really, really try to think like, is the messaging that I send out or the marketing, even the marketing messaging that's coming from, you know, a different part of the organization, does it really speak to these things? And is it poking that pain point enough where they'll actually want to talk to you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Andrew McGuire, who we both talked about in our podcast a little bit. I was talking about email strategy and stuff. And he goes, this was in December, I was sending emails. He's like, you should be hitting on the fact that they're planning for 2018. Like, you know, that all these sales leaders and executives are planning for next year. How are they going to meet these KPIs that are out there? If you don't have that base fundamental knowledge, you're never going to get through to them. You have to speak in the same language that they use. Yeah. And if you come off as like, I only sell this product and I just want to set a meeting, I can understand why that's not going to get through.
Yeah. And one last pitch on that, you guys, is if you haven't really studied your buyer, and I know that there's a wide variety of people, but just bucket them into the common personas. This one, for example, is sales, but whoever your buyer is, and really understand, like we said, those KPIs, what they're dealing with every day, where they go, what they do, so you can get into that world. Because otherwise, you know, you're just more noise. You're not someone who's kind of understands their business a little bit and can offer value.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you come to me with a message that doesn't apply to what I think about every day, how can you add value? Right? You don't even understand what I'm dealing with in a day-to-day basis. You're talking about someone 3 levels below me or 5 levels above me, right? Like, it needs to apply to my role and what I care about right now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kyle, this is awesome, man. Thank you. And again, I'll put this link in the YouTube video when I post this, so you guys can get this and read it, study it, live it. While I have you, we've got a few more minutes here. I've got some examples that I'd like to run by you. I just want to get your opinion on this one. I got this a while ago, and this is someone who had been trying to get in touch with me for, they sent a few emails, and then they sent me one that, you know, started with, "I'm sorry, we have to break up." And is there a reason that you weren't interested in discussing how we could help new users eliminate confusion around what Tenbound does, and, you know, et cetera? So, Kyle, what are your thoughts on the whole guilt trip? I call these like the guilt trip, breakup. You know, it's your fault that you're not getting back to me thing. Does that appeal to you, or what do you think about that?
I'm very conflicted. At a company I used to work at, we used an email. It was our Hail Mary email. And the subject line was, "Disappointed we haven't been able to connect." And the message was, "I'm disappointed we haven't been able to connect. It's clear that this is not a priority for you." And it was something like, closing more business and meeting your target objectives is not a priority. Like, we outlined them for the specific person. And our unsubscriber rate was very high. However, our response and willingness to take a meeting was also through the roof. I'm not a fan of like the eaten by alligators emails that are kind of gimmicky. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine who runs enterprise sales, and I was like, you know, what was his thought on like calling people out and making them feel a little guilty for like leaving you hanging? He's like, if you interact with them as a peer and they blow you off and they waste your time, like you shouldn't have any hesitations of calling them out. Like if you're a peer of a person and they're completely wasting your time, then yeah, call them out. That said, this is different because you're just trying to set a meeting with them and they haven't responded.
Okay.
I don't hate it. This one comes off as a little desperate-ish. Like it's very long, and I probably wouldn't send this, but I understand the concept and it can work for folks.
Okay. So it sounds like in your experience, you get a high level of unsubscribes where people are just like, whoa, this is a little bit weird. But
sure,
you also get a high level of people going, oh yeah, like, okay, this is my last chance. I was kind of interested in this, but I've just been so busy. I haven't been able to reply to your email.
Yeah. And the shorter and more terse you make it, the more people I thought were willing to get back to us with that. But you're right. Some people would say, I didn't ask to be emailed. I didn't want to ever meet with you, and you emailed me. Like, you shouldn't be disappointed at me for that. That's less gimmicky in my mind than the disappointed we haven't been, or sorry, the eaten by alligators ones.
I thought the first sentence is weird too. It's like, is there a reason you weren't interested in discussing how to get new users by eliminating confusion? I mean, I don't know. I don't
love that.
I'm not in love with that one. All right, so let's try this one. This is interesting in that I got like 5 of these emails, and it said, Dave, let's set up a time to speak about the blog at Drift. Okay, so if you haven't noticed, guys, my company's called Tenbound.
Yeah,
and we use Drift. We have Drift on the website, but anyways, so the first thing that I would say here is it's table stakes. The only thing I want to mention is make sure that if somebody's sending out emails on your behalf, like a mass marketing thing, or somebody from your SDR manager, that you know what's in there, because it's your name that's being sent out. And if you're pulling in the wrong token for the wrong company, that's not a good look.
Yeah. What's your recommendation? Because I'd be interested to hear yours on, of course, this stuff happens sometimes, or you'll include like Drift Inc. LLC or something, and it's clear that's just as bad as putting Drift, right? What's your recommendation to folks when they do this? Do you have them respond immediately and say, I made a mistake, this was my fault?
Well,
or do you just say ignore it?
Because that's an interesting question, because of the 10 or 20 emails that I get every day that are not relevant to what I'm doing, I actually responded to this and said, I actually don't work at Drift. And so if you think about it, in our world of being inundated with information and overwhelmed half the time, getting some kind of response is better than nothing.
Sure. Yeah.
Response from me.
Yeah.
And so it could be the beginning of a relationship. So maybe this is a tactic. But
yeah,
cheap.
I've thought of that, like showing some, being a real person by like sending an email and maybe misspelling things at times to show like, hey, and then respond right away to be like, hey, I misspelled your name. Instead of David, I put DAVD or something. And so it's a way to show, hey, this isn't a mass templated email. It's because I made a mistake when I typed it. Like, having an immediate response is another way to kind of come back and show you're a real person. This is not a good example in situations to do it, but there are times where I've copy pasted an email and just like forgot to clean up the name. Little stuff like that happens sometimes, but this is clear that it's just like a mass marketing, just send it through Marketo, right?
Yeah. I mean, and to your point, like if we're talking about like little tricks that you could put into your toolbox and just see if it works.
Yeah.
You could intentionally send out something with the wrong name and then forward it and go, hey, Bob, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I know that you work at Tenbound.
Sure.
And see what happens, because I just think like, attention is such a precious commodity nowadays. Yeah. And I can think of someone who, in our world every day who lives for attention, whether it's negative or positive. It's usually negative, but this individual is in the news every day. We cannot get away from him. And he knows the fact that attention is a huge commodity. So
Sure.
maybe there's something here.
No such thing as bad press, right? It's tough to stand out for sure. That's all I'll say. It's hard.
Something to look at. So
yeah.
And then I wanted to give a prop. We've got a couple more minutes here. But this one I thought was interesting, and it's a little small. Let me try to bring it up. And what I thought was interesting about this is he nailed my name. He actually knows my name, which is good. That's table stakes. But I like how he goes straight into some ways that he could potentially help. And I think that just a couple of the breakdowns of this is there's too many bullet points. I don't like the bold. I think it could be a little bit easier to read, but I do like the fact that, if I was sitting there going, God, I need more leads and demos. I don't actually sell SaaS software, so that's I just noticed that. But
he's 1 for 2.
Yeah, do your research, follow Kyle's pattern, and make sure that you get it right. But what are your thoughts on this one?
So I don't love it, the bolding and stuff like that. What I would say is name me a company who doesn't think that they need help with increasing more leads, closing more of the ones they've got, and then figuring out a way to get ideal customer to listen to you. Like, name a company that doesn't have that as a problem. Like, it's like, do you like to eat food and take naps sometimes? Like, yeah, of course I do. I'm a normal human being. Like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
In my mind, he doesn't come off as a person that's communicating with you as a peer. Like, in my mind, if I'm going to communicate with an executive, I need to speak to them the way they speak. And they don't ask, hey, do you need to do a better job in your company? Like, they know what you need help with. And so that's, again, a total tack that I take. But I don't love this one.
What I'm hearing you say is that we like the fact that you started with some kind of pain points, but they're too general. There's not enough research. Obviously, a little bit of research would have told you I don't actually sell SaaS software. And it's a blanket statement that everyone's got these. You got to narrow it down a little bit so that you have a better chance of getting a response.
Yeah, and I'd read some post from a head of sales that was saying something like, look, if my best friend is trying to sell me something that I don't need, I'm never going to buy it. But if a person that wrote me an awful email has something that I do, I'll probably buy it. So like, you have to take some of that into account, that maybe the KPI for this executive is increasing leads and demos, or they're going to get fired next week. So they'll take that call. Like, you might have that align. I just don't think you can count on too many of those, right?
Yeah. And 2 questions for you. So they've got a testimonial that's hyperlinked, and then the calendar. So the question number 1 is, what do you think about putting links into cold emails? I know that, people sometimes that gets caught in their spam folder and things like that, but do you do that, or what do you do?
I don't do any links, mostly because I don't track when people click them or anything like that. And I don't have like a pre-filled calendar. If someone ever gets back to me, I use Cirrus to send them times, but it's never just, here's an open calendar, pick a time ever. So I don't love the links there. That's not true. Sometimes I actually link to blog posts that other people put out, or else in one of my emails, I say like, HubSpot put out a blog post that says X, and I'll link to it, but I don't. It's not a big driver, I would say. And it's not giving me links back to my site, so it doesn't help too much.
And so with the calendar thing, I think is kind of helpful, because you can open up your calendar and just say, hey, whenever it's easiest for you. I like the way that they put that. But what you said is you don't put in a open calendar. You give them something more specific. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'll say like, here's my calendar with times at 2, 3, or 4 on Thursday that they click, and it immediately sets for them. It's like one for them directly. I like these open calendars where you can just go and book a time. I've heard a lot of feedback from folks who think that it seems pretty impersonal. So I'm not trying to sell to me. I'm trying to sell to other people who might see it the other way. So I need to,
I saw one note on LinkedIn of a lady that was saying, like, if somebody sends me an open link, some time on their calendar, she found it to be weird and like offensive almost. And I was like, I like them personally, because we all know you spend so much time trying to go back and forth trying to find a thing. It seems like it's a convenience for them to just open it up and go, okay, that works, boom.
It reminds me of, you've seen the movie Joe Dirt. one guy sells snakes and sparklers. And
Okay.
Joe Dirt's like, it's not about you, it's about the consumer. They don't want snakes and sparklers. They want something else. They want you to send them a personal email. They don't want you to send a link. They want you to say, hey, do you want to go back and forth? Some people need that. So again, it's not about you, it's about the consumer. That's the way I put it.
Okay, got it. And then what about this unsubscribe from my emails? Like I see those sometimes, and that tells me that it's probably a big mass email that we sent out, but it's also really courteous, it seems, to give them the ability to opt out. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you certainly have to follow CAN spam laws. You cannot obviously break that if you're sending automated ones, but there are ways you can message that, because you have to give them the ability to unsubscribe. And I'm certainly not a lawyer, but what I'd done in another company was we put like, if driving pipeline isn't a priority for you, click here. So it was a way for them to unsubscribe, but also position as like, if you want to make a terrible mistake, go ahead and click on this link and you can subscribe. So it's like, it's a way to definitely comply with the laws and also limit the willingness of people to do that.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Awesome, man. So we let's see if we have any open questions. I don't see any comments right now. This is great. Kyle, thank you so much for running us through that. On a final note, I was looking through LinkedIn today, and I found this. This is somebody's company description that I thought was pretty funny, and it kind of reminded me that, hey, you guys, if you know how to prospect and you're good at this, you will never starve. I mean, if you know, once you learn those SDR skills or SDR management, I mean, this is the guy's company. It's a lean B2B sales prospecting, a rep, a phone, and a list, all in one tiny bundle.
That's pretty great.
Contact us today. Company type, sole proprietorship. So
awesome.
No, I just am excited to talk about this stuff. And again, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today and imparting your wisdom. We will see you over at SIF Data, SIFDATA, correct?
You got it. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And thanks everybody for joining us. Take care.
See ya. Bye.